everybody. Welcome to our latest edition of Science Bites. I am Miss Nicole with Bloomfield Public Library, and for December, we're going to do a really fun project. We are going to make our very own bouncy balls. Now, this is a store-bought bouncy ball, a super bouncy ball, so it won't be exactly like this, but I bought us some very special kits so that we could get as close to this as possible by making something in our homes. But before we get into our project, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the science around bouncy balls. Now, you have heard me talk about polymers before. It's one of my favorite subjects. Polymers are actually a combination of something called monomers. Mono means one, poly means many. So when we string together those monomers, we create a chain. And if we link those chains together, we create something that's a little stretchy and flexible in terms of structure. And that's what our polymers are doing with our bouncy balls. Now, you can make bouncy balls using everyday ingredients you would find in your kitchen. Things like flour, you might use glue, you might use borax. There are some different recipes online. But what I've found in the past is that while you can create a bouncy ball doing those recipes, it's always a little disappointing at the end. It's never quite as bouncy as you want it to be. It does a little bouncing, but not as much as you want to. So I actually splurged and purchased some kits from this wonderful company called Educational Innovations. They're based in Connecticut. And they have these special polymer crystals all ready to go for our project. So all we need to do is create a chemical reaction by adding some water and using the appropriate times to let it set. And we are going to have as close to a store-bought bouncy ball as possible. But there's also one other bit of science at play here, and that's potential and kinetic energy. That's a big part of what we see when we play with bouncy balls. So here I've got my bouncy ball. And as my bouncy ball, let's pretend this is the ground. As my bouncy ball is going towards the ground, it's using kinetic energy, energy of motion. And when it sits at the ground, before it bounces back up, it's storing up potential energy. And they actually call this elastic potential energy in this case. But it's storing up potential energy, the potential to do something. And then as soon as it bounces back up, it goes back to kinetic energy, energy of motion. So potential energy is that stored up energy, and kinetic energy is when it's actually in motion. So if we were going to throw a baseball, when we pull back our arm and get ready to throw that baseball, we're storing up potential energy. It's the potential to do something. As soon as we release that ball and the ball is moving through the air, that is kinetic energy. So we also see the potential and kinetic energy at play with our bouncy balls. So now that we've talked a little bit about the science, I want to show you how we're actually going to make our bouncy ball. And we really only need a few things. You do need to pick up a kit from our Bloomfield Public Library. You can do it at the Prosser Library location or McMahon-Winterberry location. It'll have almost all the supplies you need. The only things you will need to add from home are water and some sort of device to time the actual project. So if you have a smartphone, it's great because they have apps where you can use a stopwatch feature. If you're going to use a regular clock at home on the wall, you just want to make sure that you're going to count with the second hand, the one that moves every second, because you want to be as precise as possible with your timing for this one. All right, let's get started. And one of the key items in the kits you receive from the library is our mold. This is what's actually going to form the shape of our bouncy ball. It's a little plastic thing, and you can actually save this if you wanted to. It's not something you need to throw away when you're done with it. But this is actually, you can see how it's going to form the shape there. And it's going to leave a hole in the top once we click it together so you can add the polymer crystals. But we're actually just going to push this together until we hear a clicking noise. Then we know it's sealed. Here again is our mold, and you're going to push it together until you hear it click. Then you will know that it's together. There. We know that this is now nice and together. If you wanted to pop it open, you're going to press these together, but for now, we obviously want to leave it together, and you can see how you have a hole in one end. Now you're going to want to actually put this on a plate because we're going to be pouring the crystals into the hole, and you might get some crystals here or there around the edge. This is a good way to catch those extra crystals, but also not make a mess. Now, in the kits that you received, you will get some packets of the polymer crystals. And they're different colors. So it'll be a mystery which colors you get. It usually takes more than one packet to fill up the mold because you want to actually get right to the top. Because picture the shape of the ball. If it's too low, if it cuts off about here, you're going to get a misshapen ball. So you want to go right to the top. So I'm going to take care of pouring in the crystals right now to show you. And now with these packets, just clip off a corner because you want to make it easier for you to pour into the mold. See, with that first packet, it didn't quite get to the top, which is why we are going to add a second packet into the mold, or at least part of a second packet. I actually have an already opened blue one that I used in a previous kit, so I'm going to fill up the rest of my ball mold with blue. So I'm going to have a ball that's green and blue. Now when you get close, take a chance to tap it a little and see if you're actually at the top. And I think that is pretty good for my mold. You don't have to get it again. You're going to the top of where the ball would cut off, not the top of the little spout. Now this next part is where you need some timing device. You might have a stopwatch at home. You might just have a regular clock. If you have a smartphone, you can usually find a nice little stopwatch feature on your smartphone. I have an iPhone, and all iPhones come with a clock app. And see, I've got mine right here. And if you open up the clock app, there's actually a stopwatch feature along the bottom. So I'm actually going to select stopwatch, and then if I start it, it's actually going to work like a stopwatch. So I'm going to reset it right now. So this is what I'm going to use to time, but you can time it however you want. So this is the part that's important. We really need to be careful with the timing at this part because we're working with an actual product, these polymer crystals, and they need the appropriate amount of time to react with the water. And that's going to create the chemical reaction that makes all our polymers stick together and meld together and form our bouncy ball. So I've got a short glass of water. You do not need something that's very tall. In fact, shorter is better. As long as it's tall enough to cover up our mold, you've got the right size. So the first thing we're going to do is dunk this in the water for exactly 1 minute. It can be a little over a minute, but it has to be at least a minute. So I'm going to gently push that in. You can see it'll sit there all on its own. And now I'm going to make sure I hit my stopwatch. And I'm going to time this for a minute, and I'll check back with you when our minute is finished. Now that 1 minute has passed, all you need to do is gently remove that mold with your bouncy ball solution in it. Put it on a plate because it'll be damp, and we're going to let it sit. We're not going to open it. I've done this once before where I accidentally thought, we're done, and I opened it, and it was nothing but goo. So we're going to let it stay in the mold and sit for at least 3 minutes, all right? Okay, you want to gently remove it, grab it by the top, maybe let a few drops of water drip off. Might be a little extra water on the top, and then I'm just going to let it sit there for 3 minutes. Let the time start. All right, a little more than 3 minutes have passed, so it is now time to pop open our mold. I'm going to turn the camera around so you can see me doing it, because you do want to do it a little carefully. You don't want to just rip it open, because it might be a little suctioned in there, a little stuck in there, so you want to sort of gently wiggle your ball out of the mold. But let me turn the camera around and I'll show you how we're going to do it. Okay, here is our mold, and if you'll remember from the very beginning, I showed you that there were these two little pieces right where we closed it together. when we press these together, it's actually going to pop open our mold. So I'm going to do that. That sort of popped it, whoops, a little bit. You can see that it sticks a little bit. We're going to slowly open it. There we go. Woo, isn't that pretty? So remember, it might be stuck in there a little bit, just like it's a little bit sticky. So I'm going to slowly wiggle it out of my mold. Woo. Here it comes. Here it comes. It's really stuck in there. It's very sticky. I probably let mine sit in the mold just a hair too long. And there we go. You can see that it's still a little damp, a little sticky, a little tacky. So now we're just going to let this sit. If you've got something that looks like a little bit of a squarish edge, feel free to smoosh it a little bit. But I'm going to let this sit on my plate just in the air. Just let the air get to it and let it dry off just a little more. And then once it's not quite as tacky, I'm going to test it out. Now I've already let the ball sit in the in the air, just letting it get a little less tacky for about 3 to 4 minutes. You might want to let it go a full 5 minutes. It's already less tacky than it was when I first took it out of the mold. Now you'll see with mine, hold it the right way, I probably could have filled it just a little more in my mold. You see how it's just a little flat on this end. So again, you want to be careful about filling that mold to the point where you think it's going to be a full sphere for your ball. So I'm a little short there, but you can already see it's still a little tacky, but you can already see, woo, I don't want to lose it off my plate, that it's a nice bouncy ball. Now, and it looks very pretty too with the different colors. Now, for this kind of a bouncy ball, it's not going to keep forever. The best way to preserve it so it bounces for as long as possible is to use a snack size baggie or some other baggie to put it in. I included a snack size baggie in your packs so that when you're not using it, just put it in the bag, squeeze out as much air as possible, and seal it up. And that will help preserve your bouncy ball for as long as possible. Eventually, it's going to lose that elasticity and it's just going to become a solid ball. So still pretty, it just won't bounce. Unless, if you throw it hard enough, it's going to bounce off of something, but it won't be a bouncy ball anymore. It'll just be a pretty ball. So everybody, that was our project for today. I kept it nice and simple for December because we're all so busy with everything, and it's just fun to do a project like this every now and again. And like I said, I gave us the cheatsy because I've done the one where you do the homemade recipe before, and it's never quite as satisfying because you don't get quite the same amount of bounce from your bouncy ball at the end. So I will include the recipe, though, for the homemade version, so you can try it at home if you want, and you can compare the two. Compare the homemade recipe version with our sort of store-bought version with the polymers that just have to be mixed with water, and compare and see which you like better. But this way you'll have that recipe, but you also can do it the nice simple way with the mold and the little crystal polymers that we got from Educational Innovations. So that's everything for today. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season, and you'll see another video from me in January. And again, we're going to be talking about kinetic and potential energy. So until next time, bye everybody.